Hey, everybody. Welcome to A Mighty Blaze. I'm Jenna Blum, one of the co-founders of The Blaze, and I'm very excited to be here today for a special interview with a very special guest, Dr. Karen Fine. Welcome, Karen.
Thank you so much for having me.
Of course. Should I call you Doctor or Dr.
Oh,
Karen or
no,
Dr.
you can call me
Fine?
Karen.
Okay. Although I kind of like Dr. Fine. Like, I think that sounds great. For those of you who are just joining us and don't know The Blaze well yet, thank you for joining us today. We are a team of 35 creative professional volunteers dedicated to connecting authors with their readers in the age of COVID and Omicron and Delta and now beyond COVID. We are still bringing you your favorite authors live to your living rooms where you don't even have to wear pants. And if you like what you see here, give us a follow on Facebook, on Twitter, on Instagram, on YouTube. We are ubiquitous. And Trisha, you don't even know this yet. Our producer doesn't know it. You can now, if you like what you see here, you can say thanks on YouTube by hitting the little heart button. And that helps keep the blaze lit. So we're very psyched about that. Please consider subscribing to our newsletter at www.mightyblaze.com. So you'll never have literary FOMO ever again. And no more FOMO. Nobody likes that. And today, as I said, we have a special animal lovers edition as well as book lovers edition because Dr. Karen Fine is a veterinarian, practicing veterinarian whose brand new book, The Other Family Doctor, which I love, just hit the New York Times bestseller list last week. Congratulations on the publication and hitting the list, so well deserved.
Thank you so much.
We are super excited for you. I'm just going to read your bio from the book jacket cover so everybody knows who they're dealing with. And guys, if you love animals, I'm going to do something really awful to you, Karen, which is to say, let's make this into an AMA. Like anything you ever wanted to ask your vet but were afraid to ask, I want you to be thinking about those questions while I read the bio and throughout, and don't be afraid to put those questions in the chat. So Karen is a holistic veterinarian who is fascinated by the relationships between animals and their people. She's an associate veterinarian in Central Mass, where for 25 years she owned and operated her own house call practice. God bless you. Dr. Fine is certified in veterinary acupuncture through the International Veterinary Acupuncture Society. I had acupuncture from my old boy, Woodrow. It helped him so much. We can talk about that. A leading expert in the emerging field of veterinary narrative medicine, also like a really interesting thing. She's also authored a textbook called Narrative Medicine in the Veterinary Practice. She lives with her husband and son and an assortment of rescues, some of whom we will have the privilege of seeing, I think, on this interview, right? Can you tell us who's with you today?
Yes, I have Sesame and Toffee, my two dogs, and they are both rescues from Aruba. And I haven't been to Aruba, but that's where they came from. There's a couple rescues that network with the East Coast. And when people fly back from vacation or whatever from Aruba to the East Coast, they can take a little puppy with them, and they're called kunikus, which is just so fun to say. And it's sort of like the rescues from Puerto Rico are called satos. So kunikus sort of means Aruban street dog.
You know, it's funny. We have a sort of a Blaze mascot who's a kuniku. Our Authors Love Bookstores on-air host, Kimberly Hensel-Lawrence, has a kuniku named Zara, who has like a curly tail, and she's one of my dog's best friends. We go hiking in the woods all the time. So I knew about the kunikus, but I did not know about what are the ones from Puerto Rico? The
satos.
Satos. So interesting. So you've taught us something already. So thank you for that. I love that. Can you hold up your beautiful book for us, please?
Sure.
I love a brand new book, baby. Like this beautiful hardcover. You guys, if you're interested in animals, in anything you ever wanted to know about veterinary life, and also in just that very personal relationship between animals and their people, you should get 50 or 60 copies of this right now from the link in the chat. How does it feel to you to hold your brand new book, baby?
It's pretty amazing. It really is. I have to say, holding the advanced reader copy was amazing, but holding the actual hardcover and seeing the book jacket and everything is just incredible. It really is. It's still very surreal, actually.
Yes, I think so. And also a strong manicure game, I have to say. But just like but I wonder, because this is not your first book, but it is like your first memoir or memoir, as I always call it when I'm talking about Woodrow. what was it like to get your book box? Like, it's always such a weird moment, right? This box comes and you're like, is this from Chewy? Oh my God, no, it's my books. Like, what was that moment like for you?
It was incredible, and we have a great video. It's sort of too big to share or whatever, but my son took a great video of me opening the box, and there's Sesame on one side of me. Who Here's Sesame. He's in his little cup. I'm sure he'll make an appearance, but he's kind of resting right now. But Sesame's next to me, and he's kind of looking at me, and he's looking at the book, and I'm looking at the book, and I'm going all googly eyed, and then the camera moves down to the box, and you can see Sesame, and he loves to chew cardboard, and he's chewing on the cardboard flap, and then he's pulling the box away.
That is so great. And where can we see this? You're on Instagram, I know, and also on Twitter.
Yes, I'm not on Twitter. I am just starting to be on Instagram. I'm honestly having a little bit of a hard time figuring out Instagram. I'm on Facebook, but the video was too big to upload, so I haven't been able to do that.
Come to Mama. We love to help authors who are figuring out social media on the blaze. Authors out there, you know, we all have to figure that out. So yes, we will have a little chat in the green room about about social, and then you can tell me all about dog questions I have about Henry. So
Sure.
this is great, and we would also love to have like dog moments at the end of our interview, and if they run around behind you, we would be so excited.
Oh,
So
that'd be great.
yeah, I'm kind of watching for them. I'm like, I know I saw Sesame and Toffee earlier, and I know they're going to start leaping behind you.
If there's a noise, they will, or if they hear something outside, but I think they've sort of settled right now, which is good.
We're secretly hoping for some WWF dog action behind you. One of my favorite things about interviews with authors in their homes, and especially this interview. So for readers who have not yet had a chance to read The Other Family Doctor, because it just came out again, it's like a brand new baby. Can you give us your elevator pitch of what the book is about?
Sure. So I had this thought for a long time that I wanted to write a book, and basically I wrote it to my clients, sort of to the people that I see every day, and also kind of even to myself. It's a lot about the depth of the relationships that we have for our animals, and that we're not alone in that, because I think a lot of people feel that way, especially when we're talking about difficult things like quality of life and euthanasia. And people even get really upset when the dog is fine. They just think about losing their animal, and it's very upsetting. And I think part of it is that there's not a lot of place in our culture to talk about that. It's called a disenfranchised grief, similar to, say, miscarriage would be another thing considered a disenfranchised grief, where it's just not really talked about. And then some people will kind of look at you like, well, you're still upset about, your cat or your dog. Wasn't that like a month ago or something like that? And not everybody gets it. And especially when we're having these really intense experiences, I think, around loss, that I think people sometimes are not prepared for the depth of their emotions. And I thought I would do that by talking about my own experiences, both as a pet owner and a dog named Rana. And I talk about two dogs and a cat in the book that are my own animals that all die. The cat and the one dog are quite old, but the other dog, Rana, right after she was dog of honor in my wedding, she got cancer, and she was only 4 years old, and she had a very aggressive, rare cancer. And I went to Tufts. She had an MRI, and basically they said, there's just nothing we can do. And I had just learned acupuncture, so I threw myself into anything holistic I could find, and I ended up home cooking for her. And she did well for much longer than she was supposed to, but she lived for a year and a half. And it was just a very heartbreaking time in my life. And even as the dog was Rana was like, had this fantastic quality of life, I was beside myself with grief, and really struggling. So I learned a lot from her, I would say. And it kind of took a long time, but I wanted to kind of show that also, veterinarians, we have the same feelings when it comes to our animals. When they have issues, we have these same experiences. So we're kind of on both ends of them.
Thank you for leading with that, because one of my questions was to introduce your viewers and readers to the intersectionality between your life as an animal human, like an animal lover, and owner. You know, it's hard to know like what to call it. Pet owner seems so reductive, right? But like your
I
life.
know, I know. I feel the same way. Like guardian doesn't feel. Sometimes I'll say caretaker,
Yeah,
but
and it
yeah,
kind of
kind
sounds
of
like maybe you're just taking care of them when they're old. So it's more like
right.
your own animals, like your bond with your own animals, and then the professional um, time that you give to other people's animals. I always think that about therapists, for instance. Like, are
Mm,
the therapists in their own lives, like, is everything, neat and clean in hospital corners? And, no, like therapists, they're just like us, veterinarians, they're just like us. So I'm really glad that you talked about Rana first. And it is, as somebody who wrote about animal grief also, like it is something that you must hear so much, that like from people on the outside who don't have animals or have a different attitude toward them, that like to say it's only a dog or it's only a cat entirely misses a huge universe of emotion that people who love their animals feel, right?
right,
So
right, definitely.
this book is about giving people permission to feel that grief. Is that
Yes,
what you say?
yes, yeah. Permission and sort of recognition that they're not alone. Yeah.
Mhm, mhm. And tell us about the journey that you take throughout the memoir, from somebody who is interested in veterinary medicine to becoming proficient at it. I mean, the whole thing, it's so fascinating to me. Like, of course, when you first start to practice, it's a terrifying thing, right? And then you
Oh
become
yeah.
proficient, and then bring us into your own experience as an animal owner slash lover slash with your own animals. Can you talk a little bit about that journey as it's described in The Other Family Doctor?
Yeah, so I didn't have animals growing up. My mother just is not an animal person, and she just kind of felt, oh, that's just too much work. So when I was 11, I got a parakeet, who's on the cover, and that was my first animal, and I was very deeply bonded to her. So that story's in the book. That was my bird Taffy, and that was what she looked like. She was a green budgie, and I always wanted to be a veterinarian, and then going into learning about it, it was so long. It was 4 years of college and then 4 years of vet school, so I got out and I was 25, and going into practice was terrifying. And now they talk more about mentoring, and we're going to kind of hold your hand a little bit. Most clinics are kind of like that. And then when I graduated, it was more like, okay, you're going to be on call, and not tonight but the next night. And I didn't know where the light switches were or anything, and that was just sort of standard practice, I think. And that was, yeah, it was terrifying, and it took a long time for me to feel confident, I think. And that's just, it's a type of, it's kind of like being a general practitioner for people. Anything can walk through the door. You really don't know. So, you don't know if you're going to have to be an ophthalmologist for your next appointment, or a cardiologist, or if you're going to have to, look at a wound and decide, can it be sutured, or what's our plan? So you might have to be a surgeon. You just don't know what's going to come through the door. So that is exciting, but it's also a little overwhelming, especially at first.
Mhm. Yeah, you're never bored, I guess. But I was very struck by that. You're not really a general practitioner. You're more like a general specialist. So you have to be a
Yeah,
specialist in everything, which is not something with human medicine that you get, right?
yeah, yeah. And it is getting a little bit more veterinary medicine like human medicine, in that there are a lot of specialists, and more people will say, okay, I'm going to bring my animal to this specialist. And but there's always people that they're not going to do it, whether they can't afford it, or they can afford it but they don't have the, maybe it's an old animal. So there it may be other reasons. It may not be that they don't value that animal. It may be that they're thinking, well, the animal's at the end of its lifespan, so I don't know that, I think I just want to manage this more conservatively at the moment and not go to a specialist or something. So we often have to kind of do our best as not a specialist, which I think is more rare in human medicine,
Mhm.
unless you're out in the middle of nowhere or somewhere like, something like that.
Mhm. All of this must be really hard. Like, and you wanted to be a veterinarian since you were a little girl, since you had Taffy. Was there ever a moment when you just thought, I just can't do this? Like, this is just too emotionally intense.
Not before I was a veterinarian, and not since, but there's definitely been moments where the intensity can be a little bit overwhelming to me. And I have a hard time, I feel like, separating from, the person and the animal and the bond they share. And that's kind of this amazing thing that I feel like I get to see, but it's also, it kind of becomes part of me. Like when I see this amazing relationship that someone has with their animal, and then it's the end of their life and it's this really sad thing and the person's really emotional. I get emotional too. And it's, I wouldn't want to not get emotional.
Mhm.
The day that I don't care at all is, probably the day to say, that's it, hang up the stethoscope. But it's hard not to take that home sometimes. And then veterinarians are known for being perfectionists. So then there's a lot of second guessing. Did I make the right call in terms of what's the next step to take? Could I have said something different? Could I have done something different? Did I help that person enough to come to grips with what's going on? If you have to give someone bad news, that's very, very difficult.
That must be such a hard thing. We just had a comment. I'm gonna pop it back up from Vicky
Yeah.
Waters. Sorry, Vicky, I don't have my glasses on. Vicky Waters, who said, my 95-year-old mom had to make the hard decision to let her dog go recently. She always liked her vet and how he cared for Sunny. He was there crying with her when it was time. And it occurred to me when I saw this comment. And I'm sorry, Vicky, sorry for your mom, because we
Very
also
sorry.
know
Yeah,
how hard that is. It's the hardest thing. But
it's
it
the
occurred to
hardest.
me,
Yeah.
it is. I should have started this interview by saying thank you for the work you do, because it
Oh,
is
thanks.
tremendously hard. And those of us who have and love our animals, we know that the one flaw they have is they don't live as long as we do. And so if you have a caring vet to guide you through letting that animal go, it is the most nourishing thing. When I had to let Woodrow go, I had a home vet, Dr. Mimi, who made house calls. And she came in to help me with him here in the apartment that I'm sitting in, instead of saying goodbye to him at the Angel Memorial Animal Hospital, which is a great place. But it was the death that I wanted to give him. And as hard as it was, it would have been astronomically harder to let go of him in a more clinical setting. So, like, I feel like you do God's work, and thank you for that.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah. Did you ever have a patient who was just completely resistant to, I mean, giving people bad news is hard enough, but did you ever have somebody say, because as animal lovers, we have to make that decision in a way you don't make it for humans. Like if your doctor says, I'm sorry, this is the end of your life, you can argue all you want, but it's not going to make a difference. But with animals, you always have people probably who say, just one more week, or no, she's going to be fine. She's just a little off her food. Like I was like this myself. I'm like, how about 24 more hours? Just a little bit,
Yeah.
how do you handle that sort of denial?
It's very difficult. And, I'm a person too with my own, sort of filters or whatever. And I'm an optimist. So sometimes I worry I'm not giving, and I try, I mean, we have to get good at giving the whole picture. I think whereas in human medicine, especially with say oncology or something, it's one thing to say, well, we'll try this next protocol and maybe not, but with veterinary medicine, people are paying. And so we often have to say, look, I really don't know what the odds are, but it's not good, and I want to be really clear with you that this is a very serious problem. But a lot of people are in denial, which is very understandable, especially if it's something sudden. Yeah. And I mean, it's human nature. But I do, sort of worry sometimes as an optimist, like, did I present that the right way? And if if the people stay in denial, sometimes if I'm at a clinic and somebody's having a hard time taking in what I'm saying, I haven't done this in a while, but and then it was COVID, but sometimes I'll say, let's have another doctor come in, or maybe I'm not their regular doctor. Sometimes just hearing it from two people cements it in. a little bit more, and then people are like, okay, I guess it really is, I guess this really is happening, and this bad news is really true. And that's why we'll show someone x-rays sometimes if we have something like that. But sometimes we have a sick animal and we don't know why, and it's really old, and say it's like an animal that's jaundiced and we don't know why. We know it's serious. It's an old animal. Maybe it's lost a lot of weight or something like that, and it's not eating. And that's a tough situation for everybody, because it's always easier if I can point to some blood work and say, okay, this is almost incompatible with life. I wouldn't say it like that, but you can point to some really bad blood work and then look at the animal and say, okay, this is, we have a reason, but we don't always know exactly what's going on. So that makes it difficult too, I think, to make a decision. And that's something you don't have with human medicine. You're not making a decision. And a lot of times you have those extensive test results that, even if you don't know exactly why, you might have an MRI saying, there's a mass somewhere or something.
Mm-hmm. That's right. And again, that responsibility factor is so great. Like, you spend your whole life as an animal owner, keeping your animal alive and doing bizarre things to make them healthy and happy. I just bought my dog tripe in a can because he was so hungry. And I was like,
Awesome.
like eating poop his whole life because he's disgusting. And I was like, well, maybe actually he would like some tripe. And I had to wear a mask from COVID over my nose when I opened the can because it was so stinky. And it's like, you do this, you do all these things for your animal, and then at the end of their lives, you think how it's so counterintuitive to say it's time to help them not be alive anymore. So again, it must be hard to break through that denial. What is your favorite part of this memoir of The Other Family Doctor? Like, what is your favorite anecdote from the book?
One of the stories, and I've told this story a lot, it's sort of one of my favorite stories, and it's in the book, is about this little dog named Peanut, who was a little Shih Tzu. And I always used to say he was my favorite Shih Tzu because he was so happy to see me all the time. And every time I came to see him, he was just thrilled, and he would do this little dance. And one day his mom called me and said, something's not right with Peanut. He's urinating off his papers. And she lived in this little apartment, and I had to climb up to there was like a deck outside, and then we'd go into the kitchen, and he would go in papers on the floor right by the door. And so I went over to see her, and she kind of had this like smoker's cough, and she would always give me this big hug. She was just the sweetest person. And I sat down at her kitchen table, and I noticed that her place looked different, and she had decorated for Christmas. So she had moved the papers, and they were now not where they used to be, and they were moved over, and they were next to this giant planter. And I said, wow, your place looks really different. You decorated for Christmas, and maybe that's affecting him. Why don't we try putting things where they were before? So she said, okay, sure. So we moved things around, and he ran over, and he couldn't pee on his papers fast enough. He was so happy to have his sort of bathroom back. So that was a big lesson to me too, and I grew up Jewish. So I wasn't used to how people decorate for Christmas until I started doing house calls. And I saw that some people, like, they put so much stuff there that some, it depends on the animals. Some animals don't care, and some animals are just kind of freaked out, and, they might act a little differently. Not only that, but we are more stressed, and our schedule is a little tighter, and we are doing different things and stuff like that. So that can affect animals as well. So I do feel like I see more kind of animal anxiety during December. So that was my first indication of that.
So interesting, because animals do like their routines, right? Or at least I've been told that dogs like their routines.
Yeah, a lot of them do. And some of them are sort of just like people. Some people are up for anything, and you can change things on them, and they can just roll with it. And some animals are like, whoa, you moved my food bowl of
My planter.
whatever, and I don't like it like that. So.
Yeah, I would not like a big planter in my bathroom. If I walked in like the middle of the night, there's a giant planter in there. Like, nobody wants that. There's also
Right.
a great story that I love about that talks about the bond between people and their animals, and the first time you saw that. If you want to share that with us, because it's such a memorable what your client said about her old dog when she brought her in to you.
Now, was this the dog Athena when I was in vet school, that had the that was boarded at Tufts and only liked me, or was this a different story?
No,
Sorry.
different story. So it's the one I will, maybe I'll just tell the story badly and then ask you to elaborate on it. But it's your client came in with her dog and the dog was really old. And so you see like a dog at the end of its life and the dog was not good tempered.
I can tell that story if you want. Yeah.
Like
That would be a tough one, I think, because it was sort of like this in the moment, like, and not a lot happened, but that was, I was very early in practice, and this woman comes in with this dog, and it's this sort of, the coat was kind of matted, the dog was grumpy. It's sort of this, black furry thing in a blanket, and she's holding it. She's holding the blanket. It was a small dog, and she's crying and had sunglasses, and she says, you might want to put a muzzle on her. And then she said, she even bites me. And she started crying. And she said, she's really a bitch, but I love her. And I was just like, oh, that's it. That is it. They're family. And we love them. And, I'm guessing she wasn't always a grumpy dog, or maybe she was, and they just had this bond, so we bond to them and accept them. It's really just like a relative family member. It was just so incredible to me that really stuck in my mind. And that was a very long time ago.
it was such a great moment in this narrative and in your overall journey to say that this woman would come in and say, she's really a bitch, but I love her. And then to sort of link that to how humans feel about other humans. But the moment that really struck me about that was that maybe the woman does see the dog as a puppy when she puts her on the table. Maybe she sees her as a grumpy old lady, but either way, she sees her dog. And then I was like reading that and like weeping, because it doesn't matter how bitchy they are or how, infirm or whatever. And it was just such a beautifully human moment about an animal. So thank you. And then tell us about the house calls. Like, tell us why you do this. And again, thank you very much for doing this, because those of us who have a hard time getting to the vet for whatever reason, like, God bless you for doing that.
Yeah, and I actually stopped doing it during COVID, and then I realized it had been 25 years, and I've got these bumps on my knees. That's called housemaid's knee from being on my knees in people's bathrooms and stuff. So I thought, and then I was doing more writing, so I thought maybe this is a good time to stop doing house calls. But yeah, for 25 years, I had a lot of patients who, sometimes they were animals that didn't do well at the vets or didn't do well in the car. Like, I had someone who had a German Shepherd, and she said she has diarrhea all over my car. And you just picture that. And she was so thrilled to have me come to her house. And then sometimes there are people that can't get out, they can't drive, and that's difficult for them. And some people, I just remember somebody saying to me, a senior citizen saying, I don't drive. And she said, I can get a ride to the vet, but I have to ask somebody. I have to ask my son or daughter or my neighbor. And she said, I can ask them, but I really like not having to. So I felt really good about being able to provide this service so that people could be more independent and say, yeah, I can take care of my animal myself. And some people just had a lot of animals and were like, okay, to round up 2 dogs and 3 cats, I'd rather have someone come in and just, do it all at the same time. So
it's a lot. So you have your own sort of entrepreneurial business. But again, I think it is such a relief for people. Just getting to the vet in downtown Boston is kind of a thing. Yeah. I remember walking there with Woodrow once when he was very old, trying to take him to our usual vet. And I was in denial about how old he was. And he had, sort of back leg arthritis. And we were halfway to the vet and he suddenly sank to the pavement and couldn't get up. We were on Newbury Street or Boylston Street. It was really busy. And people around us were like, oh my God, your dog, are you okay? And I was like, I really don't know. I don't know. So what really saved us after that was a vet who made house calls. And I love the way you described this in The Other Family Doctor. So I know we must have audience questions, guys. Like, you're missing your chance to AMA with a vet. So think about your vet. And one of the questions I had for you is, do you often get like freebie questions? Like, I'm like, okay, like in the green room, I'm going to ask you about that tripe. Like, why does my dog eat poop? Is tripe a good answer for that? But you have a chance to ask Karen all these questions. So you might as well start thinking about your questions. A couple more for me. And one is, when did you find the time to write The Other Family Doctor? Because you are like on call, you run your own business, you care for so many animals and your own animals. Can you walk us through the process of writing the book?
Yeah, it really was a passion project. And once I started, I felt like it came out like a hairball. Like I was writing any spare moment, it was stuck in there and I had to get it out. And, I'd be driving around at a traffic light and I'd be scribbling something on a piece of paper. Things like that. Things would come to me all the time. I'm like, oh, I got to write about that. I got to write about that. I got to put this in. And I knew I wanted to structure it around Rana's life. Around that story of my relationship with my dog, but there was a lot of other stuff I wanted to put in. And I don't know where I found the time, honestly. I think sometimes I would get up in the morning and try to write. And sometimes it was probably maybe once a week that I had 2 or 3 hours in a row to put into it. And that if I was lucky.
So it was like a hairball that got choked out in small increments, I guess.
Exactly.
For a long period of time. How long did it take you to write it?
Someone just asked me that recently. I think maybe 8 months or something like that.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing. That is amazing.
Yeah.
Extra kudos for that. All the writers out there like grabbing their heads and going, 8 months. We need like the work ethic for a better.
Excuse me, sorry.
No, that happens to me all the time. But another hairball, one hopes, like another.
Yes, exactly.
I will be saying this for the rest of my life in every writing class. Those of you who've taken writing classes with me, you are forewarned. I'd be like, let's get that book out like a hairball. Like, cough up that book now. Come on. It's such a great, thank you for that. So good. And then you just made the New York Times list. So tell us about how you found out and how that felt.
That was amazing. So a week ago, not this Wednesday, a week ago Wednesday, my phone rings and I'm home and thinking about dinner. My son's there and the phone rings and it's my editor. And we don't talk on the phone very often. So I thought, oh, she's calling because I haven't talked to her and the book's come out and whatever. And I'm trying to remember what she said, but she said, Karen, like she was really excited. And then she said, we made the New York Times bestseller list. And I was completely, it was not on my radar. And I was just like completely, wow, my son was right there. And I said, I can't believe this. And her phone kept, in the background, I could hear all these dings and noises because she was getting phone calls and texts and emails. And she was saying, oh my goodness, someone else she said, everyone is, the whole Penguin Random House anchor group was talking about it. So it was really, really exciting. And they sent me a link and it was incredible. It was really incredible. And we came off the list yesterday. So we're waiting to see, are we still on the list? But it was not surprising because I think, the first week it was out includes pre-orders from my limited understanding. And also my Fresh Air interview came out the day before the book went on sale. And then I was on CNN the 4 or 5 days after the book came out. So I think all that, came together.
I also think people really want to know what the inside view is. It's one of my favorite books is Lori Gottlieb's book, You Really Should Talk to Someone, because it's about therapy from the point of view of the therapist, but also she's going through her own therapy. So you have the same principle at work here where we always want to know, like, what is it like to be a doctor? What is it like to be a vet? And then just the honesty of that experience and how difficult and how joyous it is. But then also walking us through your own personal experience with Rana, like all of that, I think makes for just such a humane and heartwarming read. So I'm not surprised, but I am very thrilled for you. It is such a big moment. I think you should get a t-shirt with the list printed on it and wear it.
That's a great idea, actually. I love that.
Thank your patience, right? But yeah, so everybody, we want to push her back up onto the list. So everybody go out and buy at least 50 copies right now of The Other Family Doctor. Mother's Day is coming. Father's Day is coming. Every day is Animals Day. You guys should totally buy this. Okay, I think we have time for a couple of audience questions. So again, guys, do you have questions for Karen? Pop them up. Thank you, Vicki. Do you have plans to write another book? It's a great question.
That is a great question. Mm-hmm. And it's actually something my agent and editor are starting to ask me about. And, I really didn't have any plans, but if I have something to write about, I do really enjoy writing and I would like to keep writing. So I think I'm starting to think about either what do people want to hear? Because I really wrote this to, I work with, who I would say my clients are my readers. I work with people every day who their animals are their family members and they have certain experiences and feelings that I kind of wanted to reassure people, like, you are doing it right. Because I think so many people are just so, they're very difficult, the feelings going around, and people feel like they failed their animals a lot of the time. So I kind of wrote it to that. So I'm thinking about what more could I say that people could benefit from. So I'm definitely open to open to suggestions.
Open to suggestion. I love it. Yes. If you guys have suggestions for what Karen should write next, go ahead and put them in the chat. And your editor also is the editor for two of our blazers, for Jane Roper, whose book is out April 4th, actually, and then Mark Cecil, who is our thoughtful bro. So your editor is amazing.
She is amazing. She's amazing. I love her. Yeah.
She's very funny and she cares about her authors so much. So shout out to Anna. And then how did you get your agent and your editor? All the writers want to know,
Yes. So that is a good question too. It took me quite a long time, and I had queried a bunch of agents, and I had quite a few ask for material and then come back with, it's too much death, or I don't know where I would place it. And I ended up thinking, okay, maybe I'm not going to get an agent. I might end up at a university or a small press. And without having an agent to sort of edit it, I thought, you know what? I think I want to get it. I don't have it where I want it. I want to get it where I'm really happy with it if I end up having to self-publish. So there's an editor who is on one of the Facebook groups that I'm on, one of the binders groups, and she was offering a mini edit. So I did a mini edit with her, and I loved it. And I said, oh my gosh, I really want to work with you. Can I work with you, please? Can you do my whole book? And she said, well, right now I'm only editing people's books who go on my retreats. And my next retreat is to Italy.
Whoa.
So yeah. So my husband's name is Mike. And I'm like, Mike, I have to go to Italy. So we made that work. And I worked really hard in Italy, and along with eating a lot and having a great time with other writers. And yes, I highly recommend it. And I can, her name is Allison Williams, and now I'm blanking on the name of her writing retreats, but they're amazing. And I would like to write another book, if only to go on one of her writing retreats again, actually, because they're fantastic. And so I worked really hard, and then I came home and I queried again, and there was one agent. I sort of had a few people that, okay, I'll try these people, but there was one agent who had given me an R&R, which is a revise and resubmit. And she was fairly vague about what she wanted. She wasn't like, do these 5 things or something like that. She, it was sort of like, just sort of vague, if I'll take another look, so I emailed her and said, I have rewritten it. I've reworked it with the help of an editor. And she said, great, I'll take another look. And then she offered to represent me. And that's been great. And then we worked pretty closely together. I did a fair amount of work with her, and it sold on proposal. She worked with me on the proposal.
So great. And actually, I just had another author write to me this past week who's a novelist saying, can I see your Woodrow proposal for the memoir? And I was like, I actually don't have it. I just wrote the book first. So I might be hitting you up for your proposal. Like, what does the proposal look like? But it's such a journey. How is the journey through becoming a veterinarian and then being a writer? How is that similar? Like, do you see similarities there?
That's so cool. Yeah, I really haven't thought about that, but what a great question. I think it is, one of the things I realized about, sort of going into the writing profession is that They want to know, publishing industry wants to know that you're really serious about this work and you're not sort of doing this as a hobby. And, even though if it's not your day job, but they want to know you're really serious. And I think, vet school and veterinary medicine is the same. And, I was kind of thinking the other day is that I think part of it is being a veterinarian. It's one of those professions where it's so much your identity that it's like, if I had to, it's like, okay, I'm a this, I'm a that. I mean, being a veterinarian is right up there. Like you get that degree and it's like, that's who I am. That's in my DNA. And I think being a writer, is interesting, like that also is probably one of those things where maybe it doesn't leave your DNA. It doesn't go too far from your DNA. Like that's who you are. I think that would be an interesting conversation,
I think so too. I know a lot of writers who came to the game, quote, late, and then a lot of writers who started when they were really young.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, it's never too late, actually. And so I think it might be a little maybe different in that. And we don't have like a clear path usually, like the path that writers have taken to their books and then their careers are as individual as the writers, which is fascinating to me, despite some, basic foundational commonality. But it does get baked into your DNA. I think like once you do this, it's rare to have somebody be like, well, I did that. Now I'm going to go take up like beer making or something. It really becomes, something foundational. And we're glad that it is also a foundational thing for you. So go to another retreat, write another book, please. Eat all the good food for stamina. I think we have time maybe for one more question from our audience. Why did you decide to write a memoir as opposed to a standard nonfiction book? Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, really good question.
Yeah, that's a great question. And there's something I came across, and this is kind of what led me to the whole narrative medicine thing, is I kind of felt like people could gain from hearing my story. It wasn't that I really had a deep desire to tell my story. It was more that, and there's this thing called self-disclosure. And so that's like, if you go to your doctor and, they say, oh, okay, time for your colonoscopy. Well, I'll tell you about mine. Like, you might not want to hear about that. And therapists, I think, also are taught about self-disclosure. Like, you may not, and it could be something really small. So with veterinary medicine, it's not even talked about, but people ask for it quite a bit. And I feel like it can benefit because it's not like you're hearing about your physician's colonoscopy, which is a little like, okay, TMI, and you maybe want there to be a little more of a barrier there. But with a veterinarian, you're both pet caretakers. So, whether you're saying this is how I give my dog pills, this is what works for me, or you're saying this is how I made the decision to euthanize, I feel like people want that. And that one of the most dreaded questions for veterinarians is, what would you do if this was your animal?
Oh my God, I ask that all the time. Sorry, but I do.
Yeah, well, and that's, people that are very bonded and very, you're making these really agonizing decisions and you really want to know. And I think it's a very good question. And I don't dread that question, but I think a lot of veterinarians do. And I'd like to help veterinarians be more comfortable with it. People are asking us to self-disclose. And I feel like when I have, it's helped people. So that's why I have, sort of tried to do that a little bit where I feel like it's warranted. And it's certainly not me saying, like you're going to be my therapist and I'm going to tell you. It's sort of me saying, well, let me tell you what happened with one of my dogs that's similar. And, maybe it'll make you feel better about your decision. So that's why I decided to write it as a memoir. And then I could kind of tell the story about Rana. Because I kind of saw that journey as, like a good one that would sort of illustrate how hard it is.
Really good self-disclosure. Yeah. And it's such a critical element for a memoir as well. Like you can't actually, even if you're writing a memoir about something else, like an old dog, the memoir is really about you, I have learned. And so that self-disclosure is critical for the book, but it also is so critical for your clients and your patients. And you're right, it's not your colon, it's your dog. So of course we all want to hear about the veterinarian's dog.
Right. No one wants to hear about your own
I'm sure that if you feel like it, but yeah, we would probably, helps us more to hear about the dog. So, but that is true. I did ask my vet when I was helping Woodrow cross the river, like, what would you do in this situation? But I also, when I was getting my new dog neutered, and was asking the vet, now you're supposed to wait until they're a year old. And my dog was humping everything in sight and like whining and being a teen boy. And my vet took me aside and she said, I know you should wait ideally 9 to 12 months. She's like, personally, the first time that my dog humped another dog, I'd be like, cars out of the garage. And I was like, all right, cars are coming out of the garage, no more cars. Enjoy your cars for another week. And then cars are going away. So, but it gives me some peace of mind because there's so much conflicting information and you as the owner are alone without expertise trying to decide among all those pieces of conflicting information. So I love the self-disclosure, love the other family doctor. I would love to ask one last question, which is for your readers now and your viewers, do you have anything that you would like to say?
Oh, my dog just groaned. She just, I just got to show you, she just turned over and she went, I don't know if anybody heard, she went right at the end of you asking the question.
I think that actually is the answer that we were looking for. The dog's perspective on publishing is
right. Oh, I do have one funny story about that as well. So one of the interviews I did was Sirius Radio, which is that like in the car. So it was live and it was at 6:30 a.m. And my husband has Sirius Radio. So he's in the car with the dog. So they're not barking. It's 6:30 a.m. And he's sitting in the driveway, waiting to go to work until the interview's done. And he's listening. And the interviewer was really nice. And he said, I just really enjoyed your book. And we'd love to have you on the show again. And I'm sure you're going to write another book. And I think he said that twice. And my husband said he's in the car going, no, no more books.
And kind of doing the dog groan thing.
Yes.
I'll do the dog groan and grunt. My dog does a lot of good grunts, and then I find myself also doing the dog grunts. So when Sesame was asking or sort of giving commentary on the question is, what would you like to say to your new readers?
I would say, I don't know, enjoy your animals and don't second guess yourselves too much. I think that's kind of one of my messages in the book, I guess. And thank you for reading.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. Everybody go again. This is an amazing book. The Other Family Doctor. If you have ever had a veterinarian, if you've ever loved an animal, if you really love a good book and it's sort of like perseverance story that really brings you deep into the most humane experience most of us ever have. Grab yourself a copy of this. Karen, would you hold up your book again, please, just so we can see it?
Yeah.
We need a proud book mama moment. Thank you. So great.
And this is my grandfather's doctor bag.
Yes, thank you for that. Yeah, that's right. And you have that with you, right?
I have it right here. So let me see if I can get it in the same. Okay, so here's the doctor bag, which has been repaired because it's been gnawed on by puppies. And let me see if I can get that a little better in here. So there's the actual doctor bag. I'll turn it around. And here it is that the artist did the illustration on the back.
I love that. It's such a deeply personal story from Taffy the Budgie on the front cover to the dogs to the doctor bag. Thank you so much for sharing your story with us, both in book form and coming to see us today on The Blaze. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. This was great. And I'll see if I can get my dog Sesame over. Ceci, come here. Oh, he's sleeping. He's like, what, Mom? Come here, Sess. Oh, you stretching? Oh.
All the dogs are like, you do your human thing. We're just going to do the stretch and grunt,
Right.
And that is what they teach us. That's what's important, stretching and grunting. So everybody, great, like stretchy, grunty rest of your Thursday and Friday and weekend. And again, Karen, we want to see this book back on the list. So Godspeed and thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody. See you next time.